Hello and welcome to our after show for the highly anticipated new miniseries HBO's Our Boys. We're going to be breaking down chapters 1 and 2. There's a lot of heavy topics to break down, but we are so happy to be doing it with you, so stay tuned.
You're tuned in to AfterBuzz TV, the ESPN of TV talk. Now, let the buzz begin.
Hey AfterBuzzers, welcome to the after show for Our Boys. Man, it is a heavy chapter 1 and 2, but I'm here with two talented and intelligent ladies by my side, so hopefully you guys are joining us in the chat so we can break down these topics that are important to break down. And I'm so happy that HBO has brought a show like this to the forefront, and with some pretty epic things that we're going to be discussing, with the language being spoken in it, the how it got brought into creation and all of that. But before we get started, I am Steph. I am joined to the left, Rivet. She is our HBO fanatic. She loves all HBO shows, and this is hopefully no different, but a little bit different in terms of what is being broadcasted.
Yeah, I'm really excited and happy to be here and to talk with you guys about, this show.
And we have Tatiana. She is a knowledge buff. She loves to learn. So when she found out there was a show like this that would be bringing some historical facts, obviously some dramatized dramatized notes to the show, you were obviously intrigued.
Yes, definitely. I love to learn, love documentaries, docuseries. It's always awesome to learn.
And I am Steph. I love history. I studied human rights. I love cultural context in terms of history and how things play out, so this show was right up my alley. I will say that we're all this show shook us a bit. We didn't know exactly how historically based it was going to be going into it, but I think it's beautifully shot. I think that there's a story to be told, and the fact that it was co-created by Israelis and Palestinians alike makes it even more important, and something that I've been waiting to see growing up. I saw all the violence ensuing in the Middle East, not knowing where each other stood, but it's cool to see that art is it's doing what it's meant to do, which is bring us together and tell a story, and that's exactly what they did. So we will be breaking it down. We're going to introduce the characters. We're going to then move on to talking about the Israeli boys, the 3 that went missing, later found to be dead, and how that plays into hope versus revenge, how that leads into the title of Our Boys, and what that kind of means in the broader space of things. And then we will get into the disappearance of Muhammad and what ensues after that. And we will have a special segment. We will have our top 3, which is a fun little thing we do here at AfterBuzz. And then we will have some news and gossip from Tatiana and wrap it up with some predictions, though predictions might be hard on this one. So we'll see how that one goes. What was your guys' overall thoughts of chapter 1 and 2?
Honestly, it was very unexpected for me. I went into this not really knowing much of the history about what happened, and I first of all didn't know it was in another language, but I like that it was authentic in that way, and that they kept it in Hebrew and Arabic. And reading the subtitles, it didn't take away any of it for me. It just felt more authentic. I obviously can't imagine what it was like to be there, but watching the show, it really felt so real. Like you said, it was so beautifully shot. I was taken aback, if anything.
I really liked it because I feel like, oftentimes we're stuck in this bubble over here with our problems and just what is fed to us in the news. And so it was really awesome to see this from a different perspective. And it was a perspective that I didn't know. And so I liked how they showed both sides. That was really entertaining and very, very cool for me.
Mm-hmm. And for me, and I know for Rivet and Tatiana as well, we have friends and family and in various places of the Middle East, and we have Israeli friends, we have Jewish friends, we have Palestinian friends, we have Middle Eastern friends, Arabic-speaking friends, and respected in all areas. So to see the story being told was really interesting for me, and really stressful and emotionally weighing, but I thought it was so beautiful. The performances were insane, and I could not take my eyes off the screen for a single second. I'm nervous about the following 8 episodes because it is so real and it's so emotional, but I am excited to see where what they do with the story that is based in historical facts. So we'll see how it goes, but I'm really impressed with chapters 1 and 2, and I do hope that a lot of people tune in to the show to see what it has to offer. So let's start with the characters. There's multiple paralleling storylines being placed, and you kind of get this feeling from the beginning that they're going to intertwine somehow. And we start with Simon, who's a terrorism agent at the Jewish division of Shin Bet, the Israel security agency. And we see he has this like weird relationship with this youth Jewish terrorist turned informant. We see him getting picked up from the prison. What was your initial thoughts of Simon? Did you kind of understand where he was coming from in the beginning? For me, it took a little bit.
Simon, I wasn't sure in the beginning. I know we'll get into this later, but he was sort of talking about how we shouldn't give false hope to the parents of the boys and stuff like that. And I didn't really like that. For me, I just felt like he was a little bit pessimistic. I eventually warmed up to him and kind of see where he's coming from and everything, but initially he kind of rubbed me the wrong way.
Mm-hmm. I always try to put myself in other people's shoes. And so I was trying to think from his perspective, like imagine how much he's seen already in his line of work and the things that he's come across and all of that. So he's not a person to sugarcoat anything. And so I kind of right off the bat understood where he was coming from. Although it sounds, really insensitive and unsympathetic, he was just kind of like, it is what it is. And I have a hunch and it's right, just because of how long he's been doing it. I mean, he's married to his work.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. And I did notice for him, correct me if I'm wrong, I don't believe he had any Jewish traditional garb on whatsoever. So I thought instantly that was obviously he was a middle ground type person for this story in specific, which we see the intricate details that they went to show how many different people are created in this one area of land that we call Israel and Palestine and the territories in between. So that seemed like a creative. It had purpose to that, which was cool to see. I can't wait to get into what Rivet brought up, the idea of hope, and we'll get right into that after we finish with these characters. We then get introduced to Avishai, who's played by Adam Gabay, and he's an ultra-Orthodox teenager whose family is pressuring him to attend yeshiva. And yeshiva, for those of you who don't know at home, is a Jewish educational institution that focuses on the study of traditional religious texts, primarily the Talmud and the Torah. So you see, instantly I saw this kid who was confused, maybe struggling with some emotional issues, obviously bearing the weight of the world as all these boys are, which is what the title I think is playing into, of what is religion, what does it mean in terms of my existence, of where I am. What was your thoughts about him?
I felt like I saw a little bit of myself in him, sort of that teenager that doesn't really know what route he wants to take. His family's sort of pressuring him, and I think he's the most like relatable character for me, at least. And he's sort of just growing up and not really sure what he wants to do.
It was nice to have somebody neutral, like somebody that we could witness what was going on. Like his reactions are very genuine, it seems, and so it was nice to have somebody to kind of like sit with, and watch everything that was going on, because his reactions were pretty much mine.
Really? It's so interesting. I took him the exact opposite way of you two. To me, he was very unsettling, and I felt for him because I feel that confusion that they must have. And obviously I come from a religious background. My family is religious, and especially when religion is intertwined with your culture's history, it gets even more serious and even more pressure on kids. But sometimes I think people become, and I don't know where his character will lead, but extremists are built out of uncertainty sometimes, and that's what I felt from him, but I don't know. I felt like just a serious sense of pressure, uncertainty, and could turn into impulsive behavior. So I don't know. That's how I felt.
He was definitely easily like pressured. Like when they were walking down the street and he wasn't shouting anything at all. And then I think it's his uncle.
Yeah, his uncle.
Yeah, it kind of looks at him like, come on.
Yohai, I believe.
Yeah.
And to me, have you guys studied at all, like, the idea of cognitive dissonance? That's what it was to me. Like, where you have two contradictory beliefs and ideas, one being his uncle, who's clearly an extremist, possibly, I mean, he's racist. Anyone who's that extreme becomes a racist on both sides. And I want to make that clear. Both sides. So I don't know with him. We'll see where that goes. And then we have the young Khdeir, and he is played by Ram Masarway, I believe, and his father Hussein, played by Joni Arbid. And you could see like this interesting dynamic between the two of them, where again the idea of a boy not really being able to be a boy. He was out of school, but he was still working like kind of a really tedious job with his father and dealing with the pressures, but still just wanting to be a kid on his phone. What did you guys think about their relationship in the first episode, at least?
With Muhammad and his father?
Yeah.
Again, I did see myself, my family, I come from a Middle Eastern background. My parents owned their own businesses growing up, and they always wanted to put us to work. Like on the weekends and summer, it was like, this is the family business. You know, we're a family. We're going to do this together. And it took me back to that moment where I'm like, I just want to text my friends or like plan my summer trip or whatever. And I sort of like that was authentic to like, from what my experience is with like the Middle Eastern culture. Yeah.
I think it was classic, like parent, well, minus the work, but you know, get off your phone. I told you to do this. Why aren't you listening to me? You know, that was very relatable, because I feel like any teenager growing up with a phone kind of had that happen to them. But I feel like their relationship is definitely strained, and I don't think it's just because it's the classic teenager relationship. There's definitely something that is a wedge between him and his father.
Totally. I think, and we see it with every side of the situation, where it's these, and that can lead into our next topic, just the Israeli boys in the state of politics. All these kids are just wanting to do average kid things, but they're in this zone of extreme political turmoil and extreme religious groups that are adding to the issues. So let's get into we start with the 3 Israeli boys gone, and they're taken, and this is where Simon he wants to be very like logical about everything, and he's even told, you're the only one emotionally detached, and I don't get it. To me, I got it, because it's like when he started talking about hope, I see that, because with all groups in from the beginning of history to now, when a group of people is oppressed and there's enough hope, you're filling up a balloon, and what happens when the balloon pops? There's an explosion, and that's what I could see in his face, what he thought could happen. And Rivet, I'm curious, what were you thinking in that moment, that conversation between him and his coworker?
I'm not surprised that I think he has to detach himself from his emotions. Sort of like Tatiana was saying earlier, he's been through so much. He's seen it all play out. He really can't insert himself into the narrative. He has to take a step back. And I'm not surprised. I think that's what makes him successful at his job.
Imagine if you took on every single case that you had emotionally and went home, especially went home alone, you know, because he's not married, doesn't have any kids, like not dating anybody, you know, like that's difficult. Like that could crush a person. So, you know, he has to be that way.
Yeah, and it's really interesting because we have the Israeli side that is praying in the streets and has these massive groups of thousands of people joining in the streets for prayer, which is in hindsight a beautiful thing, and that's the thing about religion. All religions are based in this idea of like love and forgiveness and equality and all of these things, but oftentimes when politics get into religion, it turns extremely ugly. I would argue that most wars are created by extremist ideology and the miseducation of religion in the religious texts. So when I saw that, I thought, wow, so beautiful, but wow, what happens next? Like, that just stressed me out. But
I think either way, what happened would have happened. Like, if he went and said, look, you should stop all the prayers and stop doing all this, I think people would still be rioting and they would still be mass praying. And, I think the same thing would have happened either way.
Is there any way, in hindsight, even if we compare it to things that happen in America, which I think there's a lot of ties with Black America in specific, and the state of the police and the relationship between the police and Black and brown communities, is there a way that you wish things would be negotiated to the people in a different way? Because it felt like for them there was no talks, there was no communication. All it was we're doing our best, we're hiding the facts from them, and we're telling them we're doing their best. Would that be the approach you would like your government to take, or would you like a more open and honest conversation?
I would definitely want my government to be honest with me. Mm-hmm. Like, you can't, you're lying to the people, and it's not helping them. It might calm them down for the time being, but in the long run, you're hurting them more than you're helping them. I would personally prefer the honesty. Me too.
Definitely honesty. But in order to have honesty, then you have to have people willing to listen on both sides. And I think that's where one of the problems lies, is that, some people are not willing to listen because of what's happened in the past, and because they have gotten burned in the past and don't trust anybody anymore. And so when there's that much conflict and that much hurt that has happened, it's hard to come to a place where both people can actually sit down and, be civil. Both parties can sit down and be civil and have a conversation about it.
To me, if I'm looking at American history and the way we govern, and in comparison to the way other countries and cultures go about their communication with its citizens, the only time hiding things from people, the only people it helps is the people in control, is the people in power, and the only people who get hurt across history is the citizens. So we keep doing this game where we don't tell people what's happening, and then you expect them to act normal and not riot in the streets. And when oppressed people are oppressed for long enough, they will riot and they will form hatred, because hope is so, just like love and hate are so closely connected, they are almost the exact same but different by a thread. I think hope and revenge plays a very similar tie in that same sense. Before we move on to our next topic, though, I do want to thank you guys for tuning in at home. You guys make this possible. You make this discussion possible, and you make us being the ESPN of TV talk possible. We love being able to talk about all these TV shows that bring up important topics and important historical backgrounds. So thank you so much. One thing you guys can do to help us is, if you're watching on YouTube, make sure to hit that like button, leave us a comment, and we'll make sure that we can talk to you guys after this episode is done. And if you're listening on iTunes, which is maybe my favorite, leave us those 5 stars for an extra spicy review as well. We absolutely love those reviews, and we just want to thank you guys for joining us week after week. So moving on to where things get really crazy is when we find out the 3 Israeli boys were found dead, and then Muhammad is working at a restaurant and can no longer speak Arabic. I mean, that is so crazy.
It's really crazy. That's really crazy. And had to sneak out the back.
Just the fact that this is a reality. Like, this happened. Like, people went through this 5 years ago. I think it was, if I'm not
2014.
mistaken. 2014. Yes, it's hard to wrap my mind around it, because I know these things happen, but to see it play out on screen and knowing that it's depicting real life events, it was so sad. And I know it's true, because these things happen in the Middle East and other countries as well, it was so sad to watch. I feel like I was holding back tears at that moment because I don't get it, because I never lived anything like that, but seeing it play out, knowing it was real, it was really hard.
It's really hard to watch, and I'm on a lesser scale, we face similar issues in America where people are often, and brown and black people are often code switching is what it's mostly called in America, where people can't act the same as they would at home as they do in day-to-day lives at work or in public areas, and they have to hide their language or hide the way that they look and dress, and it's truly insane. And when you start policing the way you talk and speak and look, you have serious issues on the rise, because you cannot repress people's cultures. People will boil and they're not going to assimilate. That way of life has never worked, and even historically speaking, a lot of the issues in Israel and with Israel and Palestine were interconnected with British rule and governance. So the idea of trying to colonize or change cultures and people in your place will never ever work, and it's so disturbing to watch. And that scene stressed me out. I'm like, what's gonna happen now? But that wasn't what happened. It didn't happen then. It took me for a turn. I didn't know if it was gonna happen then or later. That did you guys think that?
I mean, I was just fearing for their life when they snuck out the back, and I thought for sure somebody's gonna know that, and when they were in the trolley and that guy was looking at him, and I thought for sure somebody's gonna hit him in the train, or they're gonna kill him, or something's gonna happen there. I mean, it's just such close quarters, and it was so crazy, and then everybody was beating on the train, and I just I thought, but they looked scared. But honestly, if I put myself in the same situation, I would be losing my mind.
Oh my gosh.
But they were just kind of nervous about it, and stayed on the train. And then by the time they got home, they were like, okay, yeah, all right, okay, are you going to wait up for me? No, I'm going to go take a nap. All right.
I love that you brought that up, Tatiana, because I was equally thinking that. They're stressed right now. They are really stressed. The father's stressed, calling, telling him that the in quotes, the Jews have it out for the Arabs now, so please get home. But when they get home, it's back to normal. I mean, he's hanging up a Ramadan sign because they all are about to be, or started their fast, and was hanging out with friends, walking in the streets. And it's really interesting because when we think of places that have violence in different areas, we think the entire place is like that, but that's not. That's how intricate these things play, is that it's different when you're actually on the grounds. And that was the first time really seeing kind of in the lens of what it would be to be a young Palestinian or Israeli boy.
It took me a second to switch my brain.
That it's not our life. If that happened, we'd be I'm building a tunnel. I'm not going anywhere.
I'm not going out of my house.
I was Mom, watch me. Watch me.
Know where I am at all times. There's no way. So it took me a second to think, oh, okay, they're good. Okay, they're fine now, right?
Yeah. I did not think they were going to make it home. I really thought something was about to happen on the trolley. It was just so intense. But I think it was more so us holding our breath, and they just sort of looked nervous. But I'm surprised they made it home.
And finally, we are led to the disappearance of Muhammad and the police investigation that followed it. So when Muhammad leaves the house and he's right outside, the mom sees him, and then all of a sudden the mom, at the same time, I'm kind of wondering creatively what the decision was when the mother was saying to him before he left, I can't breathe, Habibi, don't go too hard.
That's a mother's intuition.
You think?
I know it. I know it. I'm a mom. So you wake up, there's times, you wake up in the middle of the night and you just think, I gotta pray. Or I have this sensation, I can't breathe. And the first thing you think of is your kids. And it doesn't matter. You don't sit there and think, well, what could it be? Is it something that happened yesterday or tomorrow? You just do what you need to do. And I 100% believe that that's what it was. She knew something's not right, so I'm going to pray. because that's the first thing that you do, you know, when you're a person of faith or you know, what have you, you meditate or you pray or, you know, you do what you have to do when you don't know what it is. And I 100% believe that's what she did, because what happened next is what happened to her son, and she kept checking on him too. Yeah. You know, so it was just, I wholeheartedly believe mother's intuition.
That makes so much sense. It really does. And I saw a lot of my mom, like my family's Catholic and we grew up pretty religious. And I saw a lot of my mom in that moment because, like you said, initially she would just pray and like, it is a mother's intuition. I'm not a mother, but I have one. So I completely understand what you're saying. It makes total sense.
I mean, it's so scary to think about. Every time I left the house, my mom I'd have to call when I got somewhere, when I was going to bed, and when I woke up. And when you're a kid, you don't get it. You're like, why? Everything's fine.
Leave me alone.
Leave me alone, Mom. And then when you see things like this, and when you get older and you eventually become a mom, you're like, oh, because like you just don't know.
Because you worry all the time. All the time. Because it's like your heart is walking around outside. You know, and I can't hold them forever. I can't be like, stay with me forever. You know, you can't do that. You have to send them out.
That's heart-wrenching.
Yeah, it's difficult.
It really is.
And then when he is gone and his father cannot find him, and they can't find him, and the mom saw him, and then all of a sudden he was gone, that Hussein's performance was gut-wrenching. I mean, I haven't seen a performance like that, and I don't know if ever, honestly. You could just see it in his eyes, and it felt like I was like, that was the hardest part about breaking down the shows, because it felt like a documentary and not a show. And so I need to like take a step back and realize a lot of things were done for dramatic effect, but this position as a father, I do not think can be. I mean, this is exactly what I think my father would have done and acted like pure shock, roaming the streets, not wanting to like hear any bit of bad news, just wanting to find your child.
And you see the level of almost panic just slowly rising.
This is when I started crying watching him. And the mom, but then watching Hussein, I was like, I'm done. I can't, because you know what's going to happen, and it's just, it was horrible. How was this scene for you, Rivet?
Like Tatiana mentioned, just that growth, like that, oh, you know, where's Muhammad? And they're asking each other and they're calling him, and slowly, it really truly was. I think the mother as well, both of their performances was so believable. It felt so real because it built up, and in their eyes and in their skin and their facial expressions, and it felt like I was going through it with them. Like, it was just so hard to watch. I think I definitely cried during that scene too.
I think the hardest thing to watch was when the police told him, you know, we're going to bring you to the station. Come with us. We'll write a report. And everybody around him is freaking out. And he's still in the midst of his panic and probably turning somewhat into grief, right? And hope. All these mixed emotions. He's still trying to keep the peace.
Yeah.
Still, he's saying, calm down, don't worry. No, I think I'm going to go. And he's trying to make up his mind. Should I go in the police car or not? Should I or not? And everybody's yelling at him, and he's dealing with all this inside, and he's still saying, don't do anything crazy.
Because he just wants to find his son. But what was really an interesting and important piece of information that came before this was that they speak of, quote unquote, the settlers. And if you don't have historic background, this is to assume that they're speaking about Israeli and Jewish people who have moved into previously Palestinian-owned territory and previously encompassed by only Palestinian people. So there was a attempted kidnapping of a kid 2 days prior, I believe. And so this reminded me kind of in the times of the O.J. Simpson case, right before was the Rodney King police brutality night, and which ensued riots, and that kind of similar feeling where when people already don't trust you because you screwed up so badly, like it's so hard for that second thing to happen. And for Hussein in particular, I felt like you don't know what to do. You have so much mistrust with this government. You see on the police outfits, they all had the Israeli flag. And so it's, who do you trust? You see your people that you spend your day-to-day with, you share a culture and religion with, and then you see the government who's supposed to, and the police who's supposed to protect you. So I don't know. At that point watching, I didn't know what he should have done, and I kind of felt like, if you go, will you find more answers? Or if you go, what happens? Will they start blaming you?
It's tough. I mean, I do think ultimately he did make the right decision, because everybody, you know, all his friends, his neighbors, his family, they are so emotionally involved in this, and they, as much as they want to help, I think they might have made it harder for him, whereas the police are not, you know, emotionally invested. And I don't know. Again, it's tough. I don't know.
I think he thought maybe, like, resource-wise, going down to the police station was probably the better idea. I think maybe he thought he could cover more ground, have more at his disposal, just for the purpose of finding his son. If he stayed with, you know, his community, it would have been, I think it just would have been a different approach. Maybe he thought that it wouldn't have been as organized, or maybe he thought, you know, they don't have as many resources, as much ground to cover, you know.
Which, yeah. They clearly don't. They were showing the different cities and areas, and one was just more highly developed than the other, technologically speaking, I would say. Just the way the architecture of the cities where mostly Israeli and Jewish people were living, and in comparison to the Palestinian and Arab people. So I would assume that he probably thought that they would have more resources. But when they were dismissive of his claims, I just wanted to wring their necks. Like, and anybody who's missing a loved one would feel that, like, you need to be, and it bleeds into another great conversation where it's like, how do victims become the people in question? In any sort of situation, when people are honest to God, desperate for any sort of answers, or anything has happened to a loved one's, how dare you bring them into question of what they are capable of? And that's exactly what we see with Hussein in the questioning. Did you guys expect that, or how were you feeling during that scene in particular, when they brought him to the police station and were questioning him?
I think it goes back to they don't really trust each other. Like, he doesn't trust the police, and they don't really trust him as well. And I think the hardest part of that whole scene for me was when they were asking him what Muhammad was wearing, and they had him call his wife and asked about his underwear. And then I think that slowly was when they started to realize, like, why are you asking about his underwear? Why are you asking about that? And the police are saying it's protocol. But I think that was the hardest thing for me to watch, because I think that's when they realized our son is probably not coming home.
I think it was, if I put myself in his position, my first inclination would be to think, you know, why do you think that I did it? Number one, because I'm his father, and then number two, you think that my people did it to ourselves, like
asking about honor killings.
Yeah, like, and that would frustrate me on a whole different level. Like, it would be insulting, you know. I'm here for my son. I'm not here to talk about this other stuff. So it's kind of like I imagine that he would have to separate that in his mind, you know, because that could totally go off on a tangent. Yeah. And he could argue with them about that. Look, you know, this is how I feel about that. But he had to separate and go, okay, no, I'm here for my son. So what is this about my son? It's asking a lot of a person.
Yeah.
When somebody is missing, you know, that's important as your son. And, you know, you're not being completely honest with them. I feel like, if anything, that's the person that you want to be the most honest with. And since they took away his phone, it's not like he can tell anybody. You know, so you have him in a room, guarded. There's no better time, to be honest. with what's going on.
And in the parallel scene, we see Simon and them actually reaching more developments in the case and what has happened, and they find a burned body who they suspect is the boy, as he matches some of the description, but he's burned and mutilated, so they can't really identify. But this brings about the conversation of what each party or each group thinks about one another, and the miseducation of both of them. On one side of the Israeli Jewish side, we see them asking about honor killings, and it brings about if he was gay or not, and the issues with that in their culture. And then on the flip side, they were saying Jews don't burn people, especially kids. And we see earlier in the episode the rabbi saying that kids are basically like the no zone, like you don't touch children, which is across cultures. Many people believe that because you have to be a psychopath to go after children, really, humans in general, but children especially, and so that's what made it so disgusting. But then we see the Simon seeing a watch in the footage of the kidnapping, and he said Palestinians don't wear watches. So, and radical Jews are not necessarily religious, and an Arab knows an Arab, and you can't assume Jews are incapable of cruelty to their enemies, and all these things that are wrapping around. And to me, I take it as that humans are humans, and they have their own selfish desires and actions that they will play into. And so when we start generalizing groups of people, that's where we lose kind of the idea of what actually did happen. I think there's truth in some of those statements, but in some it's like you are missing what's in front of you. What did you guys think about those various statements that were said throughout the episode? Did any of those, you felt like some of them were true and some of them weren't, or do you think they're all problematic at its core?
I've heard people, like other Middle Eastern people, say like, oh, I can tell if someone's, Iraqi or where, Syrian
Afghani
or wherever they're from.
Pakistani, yeah.
Yeah, and I've never really seen it as problematic until sort of we saw it play out on screen. But growing up, I have, like, that's very accurate. That's how people, talk, and that's how they think. And it's, I don't know. Once again, it's just like these things I never really thought about before. It's just like, oh, because I can probably say the same thing. I'm Chaldean and Assyrian, typically. If I see someone, I, like, have an inkling. Like, I can tell if they're from the same culture as I am or from the same city or whatever it is. But I don't know. They put me in for a little bit of a surprise, I guess. I don't know.
I think it's descriptive, part of it.
Yeah.
Some of what he was saying is descriptive, and when you're raised in a certain culture, you develop certain mannerisms, that you wouldn't otherwise have. So I think there's truth in some of that, but there's also, like you were saying, humans are humans. Anybody can kill anybody, Doesn't matter what you are, or what mannerisms you have, or what culture you were born into. You're all capable of the same thing.
You have to be like Simon, which is why he is the main character in the investigation, because he's looking for facts, even though the watch things seem true to me in context, cultural context, and economic context. That seemed like something that could play into part, and he judged the whole thing like, you don't know that Jews may not burn people historically, but you don't know that they couldn't. Like, anyone is capable of anything in these kind of times. And so for me, seeing the questioning of the hypocrisy of racism at its core and tribalism and all this religious extremism brings about a lot of great questions. And I'm always talking about it with people because, as I said, human rights is my jam. So I always like to question myself and where I am. And everyone evolves, and I think that's what people don't realize. You start at a space because you were raised with certain people that look a certain way and act a certain way. And I always say that humans are structured to find patterns in things. So when we find patterns, that's where we build stereotypes. But my rule of thumb is that you can think something that could be racist in your head. What matters is the second thing you do with it. Do you act on it, or do you realize that was racist, and then you don't act on it. So these questions are, I'm really excited for them to explore all of these ideology, and we're left at the end of the episode not really knowing what's happening, but there's riots in the streets. We know that Muhammad is dead. He was burned and mutilated. We know that 3 Israeli boys were killed by an extremist group, Hamas, and that is kind of where we leave off.
Yeah. It's a lot.
Yeah.
It's a lot.
A lot to handle.
That's just getting into it.
Yeah.
Just getting into it. But any lasting thoughts on the episodes that we watched? It's okay if you don't.
I just want to give a quick shout out to Alicia420, who says, I've been thinking of starting the show, but was waiting for AfterBuzz, so I haven't started it yet, but sounds good, and we'll be here for next week. Can't wait. Thank you for tuning in, and we're looking forward to seeing you for the rest of the season.
Yes, thank you. Okay, let's before we do our news and gossip, let's do our top 3. So the top 3 is kind of for each AfterBuzz episode of the premiere and the finale. We break down our top 3. And today's top 3 will be our favorite historically based shows. And this was hard because there's a lot that have been done and a lot recently and some in the past. But we narrowed it down to Chernobyl, which is also an HBO miniseries. Roots, a classic, probably showed in your local history class growing up, and Wild Wild Country, which is on Netflix. That one is a crazy one that I didn't know the story of until I watched the show, so I would definitely suggest that. Those are our top 3 that if you like this show, you should definitely check those out. And then Tatiana, you have some news and gossip for us?
I do. I have news. I read an article for the New York Times, and it was basically going over the 3 creators of the show, which is Hagai Levi, who's Israeli, and Tafik Abu Wael, who is Palestinian, and then Joseph Cedar, who is Israeli raised, but he was actually in New York. And the reason why I say what their background is because it was kind of controversial when they were talking about the show to make sure that all parties were represented. And so they made sure to get representatives from everybody. And they actually said that they argued a lot on set and when they were coming up with the show, because there is a lot of tension around this subject. So they wanted to make sure that it was hashed out. And HBO actually approached Levi in 2015 and asked if he could adapt an article from the New York Times about the murdered boys into a series. And then from then, Levi brought on Joseph as a director and co-creator. And then they approached Tafik, who doesn't do political stuff. So he originally said, no, I don't want to do it. Wow. But then they actually took him back and they traveled to East Jerusalem to meet the family of Muhammad.
Wow.
And that is what convinced him to hop on board and do the show. And this is actually the first entirely Hebrew and Arabic language series to air in the U.S.
Wow.
That is huge.
It's huge.
That's all. I thank you for sharing that. I think I read a similar article, and to add on that, I wrote down one quote from it where Cedar was saying, we felt a responsibility to represent a narrative we believed was true. These narratives are not the same. What the audience will get is 2 separate stories around the same event, which is how history is all the time. So thank you, Tatiana. Is that it for news and gossip?
Yes, it is.
Thank you so much. And for our special segment, we're going to either each week be breaking down kind of a fun fact of what's happened in the episode or highlight a actor from this series. For today, I do have one fact that the series was co-produced by Michael Lombardo himself, the man who served as HBO's president of programming between the years of 2007 to 2016. It was under his supervision that the network accepted shows that helped build HBO's legacy, such as Game of Thrones, Boardwalk Empire, Veep, The Leftovers, and more. So that's really interesting to me because this show, the creators and the producers, and I'm sure HBO will receive a lot of flack for it. I think it will receive a lot of praise, but with this issue in particular, it does not usually blow over well to talk about. So we'll see, and I applaud their bravery, because I think history and stories have to be told, and that's the whole reason that we create. It's why we do what we do. We like to be in an artistic platform where we can speak and make images of things that aren't always spoken about. Mm-hmm. So I think for predictions, I would like to say what you hope to get from the series, because this is a weird one.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Starting with you, Tatiana, what do you hope to get out from the series moving forward in the next episode?
Honestly, knowledge, just a different perspective on it, because I remember when this was all going on and it came across the news 5 years ago, it wasn't what was being told now. Not even close. In fact, it was turned into something completely different. And so that's what I remember. And so it's really nice to see the specifics of what actually happened, so that way I have a better understanding of the entire situation.
Right.
And I agree. I want also our country, I want Americans to be more educated, and unfortunately a lot of us don't really pay attention to things that are going on in other countries, but when it's brought to entertainment, it's brought to HBO, it's dramatized for us, but in a very respectful manner and in a manner that shows both sides. I think that's really important for us to learn historically as a country. So.
Yeah. I agree. I think that it can do a greater job of showing what taking extremist beliefs on any side will do to people and the population as a whole. Because I do believe way more people are good than bad, but the bad can outweigh the good, as we've seen across all genocides and horrific acts of violence, that all it takes is one bad seed to convince a mass out of fear and the fear of the unknown. So definitely want to see kind of those ideas played out into the series and people understand what evil can do to people. So that wraps up chapters 1 and 2. I'm excited to see what chapter 3 brings. Until then, from Rivet, Tatiana, and me, Steph, we want to thank you guys at home for watching, and we will see you next Monday.
Our founder, Keven Undergaro, and me, Maria Menounos, would like to thank you for tuning in to AfterBuzz TV. Remember, we're not just the first, we're the biggest in the world, and we're the only destination for all your favorite TV shows. Whatever you crave, we've got it. So go to AfterBuzzTV.com and check out our lineup. Buzz you later.
The views expressed herein are those of the hosts only and do not necessarily reflect the views of AfterBuzz TV or its owners or principals.